talk. And this talk is going to be based on the 2016 Watchtower of March, pages 31 and 32. And the theme is, did Satan physically take Jesus to the temple when tempting him? And we're going to ask Brother Rivera to come up and help us with that point.
As we read about Jesus tempting, or Satan tempting Jesus in this week's Bible reading, you may have pictured things happening a certain way. You may have pictured in your mind a few stones laying on the ground waiting to be turned into bread. If you're like me, you pictured a hand reaching out to Jesus, holding what represented all the kingdoms of the world. Satan also told Jesus to throw himself off the temple and test that Jehovah would rescue him. Many people believe that that didn't happen literally, but it was simply a vision. That just as Satan couldn't literally show Jesus all the kingdoms of the world from atop a mountain, he couldn't have him go to the temple. But this part asks us to consider, did Satan physically take Jesus to the temple when tempting him? Let's examine these scriptures again, and we're going to try to picture what's happening there. Turn with me to Matthew chapter 4. We're going to stay in this chapter, so keep that open. Matthew chapter 4, verses 5 and 6. Then the devil took him along into the holy city, and stationed him on the battlement of the temple, and said to him, if you are a son of God, throw yourself down. So here the devil says, or it says that the devil took him into the holy city and stationed him along the battlement of the temple. Luke gives us a parallel account saying in chapter 4 and verse 9 that Satan led Jesus into Jerusalem and stationed him along the battlement of the temple. Mark also tells us that Jesus was tempted, but he doesn't give us any details on that. So that's the information we're given. Now let's examine what Matthew says about those other two temptations. You'll notice they have something in common. Let's read verses 2 and 3. After he had fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, he felt hungry. And the tempter approached and said to him, if you are a son of God, tell these stones to become loaves of bread. So Jesus had been in the wilderness. He hadn't eaten in 40 days. He's very hungry. Satan tells him to use his miraculous powers to feed himself. There's nothing wrong with Jesus eating, and we know that later on he used miracles to feed thousands. So the temptation here was for him to use his powers to satisfy his physical desire of hunger. He would have to take action. The other temptations found in verses 8 and 9. Again, the devil took him along to an unusually high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to him, all these things I will give you if you fall down and do an act of worship to me. But Jesus knew that there would one day be an end to all the other kingdoms of the world, and he would rule over it. So there was nothing wrong with that, but Satan told him to perform an action. Fall down and do an act of worship to me. So both of these temptations required physical action. Let's look at verses 6, and we're also read 7 at this time. 6 and 7. And he said to him, if you are a son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will give his angels a command concerning you, and they will carry you on their hands, so that you may not strike your foot against a stone. Jesus said to him, again it is written, you must not put Jehovah your God to the test. What physical action did this temptation require? Jesus would have to throw himself down. If Jesus was simply standing in the wilderness, looking at a vision, and he threw himself down, he'd get a little dirty. But if he was standing on the battlement of the temple, him throwing himself down would result in his death. He would need his Father to save him, and he'd be putting him to the test. So Jesus was standing on the battlement of the temple. Was he violating any law by standing on that temple and being a non-Levite? The Greek word here that's translated temple, it probably refers to the entire complex and not just the temple itself. So if Jesus was standing, if Jesus stood, say, at the southeast corner of that complex, that's a 450-foot drop to the ground, and that drop would have resulted in Jesus' death. But standing at that location, he wouldn't be breaking any laws, and he'd still be standing on the battlement of the temple. So we now have the question, If Satan literally took Jesus to the temple, how did they get there? Let's look at Appendix B. It's in the back of the Bible. You'll see at B10, it's a map of Israel during the time of Jesus. Appendix B10. On the bottom left, you'll see a scale. It shows 0 to 20 miles. To the right of there is the Dead Sea. Just north of that is the wilderness of Judah. To the left is Jerusalem. It's less than 20 miles. The roads in that area weren't straight, so it could have been a little more. But Jesus and his family, they made a 150-mile round-trip journey from Nazareth to Jerusalem every year. So this was a relatively short walk, and it wasn't out of the question for Jesus to make that. Now, it would have taken some time. Again, the Bible doesn't tell us how long Satan was actually tempting Jesus. So, did Satan physically take Jesus to the temple when tempting him? It's very possible, but we can't know for sure. What we do know is that these were real temptations, and Jesus remained faithful to Jehovah.